Good evening, my name's Shan Neal and I'm Senior Education Officer for Early Learning and Childcare at Education Scotland. I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar specifically designed for childminders to provide an overview of realising the ambition. Tonight I'm absolutely delighted that I'm joined by colleagues from the Scottish Childminding Association and also from Education Scotland. So before we go any further, I'll get them to introduce themselves.
Yes, thanks, Shan. Hi everyone, I'm Janine Ryan and I'm Head of Childminding Services with the Scottish Childminding Association. And it's lovely, I've had a quick nosy at the names because I am a nosy Parker for them that knows me, and I'd love to see you all, and I'll pass you on to Lynn now.
Hi, my name's Lynn Murray, Professional Learning Manager with the Scottish Childminding Association. And boy, were we blown away at the response to this event tonight, but delighted to everybody that could come along. And I'm going to pass you back to Shan.
Yep, and I'll just ask Katrina to come in and say hello.
Hi everyone, I'm Katrina Gill and I'm Education Officer for Early Years at Education Scotland. I'm absolutely delighted to be here tonight.
So that's your team for this evening. We've got a presentation for you to start off with, and there will be opportunities for you to ask questions at the end of this evening's session. But one of the things we did want to do was to give you the opportunity to capture your questions as we were going along. So you'll see there on the welcome screen, if you want to ask a question anonymously, you can add that onto Menti. So you can either scan the QR code that's on your screen just now, and that'll give you a box where you can enter a question for the panel if you'd like to. Alternatively, you can go to menti.com and type in the number 93433443, and that will also take you to the page where you're able to ask questions anonymously. If anybody does want to add a question to the chat pane, please feel free to do that. And when we get to the question and answer session at the end, if anybody's feeling brave enough to put up their hand and switch on their microphone and the camera, we would love to see you at the end in person as well. But we wanted just to give a range of options to people. So, as I say, we were absolutely blown away by the response to this session. And tonight I'm going to take you briefly through an overview of realising the ambition being me. And this session this evening is the first of a number of sessions that Education Scotland has committed to be involved with as part of our support for childminding. And that's part of a bigger commitment by Scottish Government to support the childminding sector in Scotland. It's important to stress, though, I think, that although we're doing this and we'll be doing a number of other sessions throughout the year specifically for childminders, that we really do see childminders across Scotland as being an absolutely key part of the early learning and childcare sector. And so all of our support for the sector as a whole is very much developed with childminders and other early learning and childcare practitioners in mind. So please don't think if we don't mention childminders specifically in the title of anything that we're doing that you're not invited or it won't be relevant to you, because that's absolutely not the case. We'd really love to see you at any of our early years sessions. And to recognise that, we tend to talk in Education Scotland about educators and practitioners, and we do that in the very broadest sense of the word. So it's about recognising that people with a whole range of different job titles and a different range of experience are committed to and providing for supporting the needs of our youngest children. And we absolutely, as I say, see childminders as being a key part of that. We know, and this question always comes up when we talk about realising the ambition, we know that many of you will have a hard copy of Realising the Ambition and or one that you've downloaded from the internet. We're also very aware this evening that we have a whole range of experience in the room with us tonight in relation to realising the ambition and indeed to childminding in general. Some of you might be very new to this field, might not have had an opportunity to look at realising the ambition yet. Others of you we know are very experienced and very skilled, but we do hope that our presentation this evening will complement any professional learning that you might have done with SCMA or other providers on this. And I think, as I say, many of you will have either a hard copy and or an electronic copy. And I think one of the things that we're always keen to encourage practitioners to do is to have an electronic copy that you can download from the Education Scotland website. Because as we go through the presentation, you'll see that one of our aims is to support you in getting the information you need to support you in your work. And one of the great things about the PDF version of Realising the Ambition is that the links in it are almost all clickable. So if you're interested in a particular area or you want to go back and read the research that we're quoting, you can just click on that link and go through to it. But Janine, I think you're going to say a wee bit about the distribution of Realising the Ambition for us.
Sure, yes, Shan, and absolutely, totally agree that using the electronic version is really helpful, and I would emphasise that being able to go and click on links and have the updated information is really valuable. We do know, however, that people also do like a hard copy and have been asking for that. That was an offer from Scottish Government. So just by way of an update to let people know, because I know there has been a delay, and to be fair, I don't think any of us expected COVID to come in the middle of all this and, you know, essentially hold up a lot of great work. So what Scottish Government have just advised recently is that there has been a backlog of around 700 people requesting Realising the Ambition hard copies. So they've got that list pulled together now, and they've actually just currently finalising an order with the publisher. So another order of 700 or so Realising the Ambition hard copies is due to come in, and as soon as they receive that in, they will be sending them out. So there's quite a significant number. So if people wonder, is my name in there? It quite possibly is, because that's quite a large number. But as I said, it's with the publisher just to release a final set of copies so that they can get those sent out. So hopefully within the next, I'm going to say few weeks, because I don't know quite how long it takes for that to turn around with the publisher, but it will be on its way if you've already made a request. You don't need to repeat, you don't need to send in another request. It's already with Scottish Government and they've got a note of it.
Thanks, Janine. So I suppose the question is, why did we need a refresh of Building the Ambition? Well, we know that there's been a determined focus by Scottish Government to work towards realising the ambition for Scotland to be the best place to grow up and learn. And with the further expansion of funded early learning and childcare to 3 and 4 year olds to 1140 hours per year, and also to around a quarter of all 2 year olds by August of this year, it was time for a refresh. But realising the ambition isn't all about funded early learning and childcare. The expansion policy not only seeks to extend funded places, but also to support improvement across all provision for early learning and childcare across Scotland. At Education Scotland, we were also really aware that the sector was working with 2 sets of national guidance prior to us publishing Realising the Ambition. We had the pre-birth to 3 improving outcomes guidance, as well as Building the Ambition. So one of the things that we were really keen to do was to try and streamline that policy and guidance landscape for you a bit. And so it's helpful to know that Realising the Ambition replaces and updates both pre-birth to 3 and Building the Ambition. And I know there's been a little bit of confusion about there in some parts of the sector. So really you don't need, if you've got Realising the Ambition, you don't need either of the previous 2 documents. Everything that you need, as I say, we have updated and transferred over to the new guidance. And I think one of the things that we are really pleased about is the fact that with the update, we've had the opportunity to extend the reach of the National Practice Guidance for Early Years. So Building the Ambition, many of you will remember, applied to children who were attending early learning and childcare. But with realising the ambition, we have extended the reach of that to the end of the early level, which is towards the end of primary 1 for most children. And again, I know that in the work that you're doing, you're supporting that key transition. Many children will be with you throughout their early learning and childcare experience, and then also moving on to school, keeping their placement with you. So this is relevant to all of those children you're working with, not only of preschool age, but also into the early years of primary. So realising the ambition is for everybody working with children in their early.
Shan, your mic is muted.
Thanks. So I'll start that wee bit again. So realising the ambition is for everybody working with young children in Scotland. And we know that the earliest years of life are absolutely crucial for children if they're to get the best start. And evidence tells us that if our early learning and childcare is of high quality, then we can make a real difference to children's ability to succeed in life and to close the gap in outcomes for children. So this slide includes some of the key principles of realising the ambition, and you can see there some of those that shaped the guidance as we were developing it. And the principles were informed with our consultation with Childminders, with organisations like SCMA and others, because we were really keen that we get this guidance right and that it speaks to everybody, as I say, that's working with young children in Scotland. We needed it to be accessible if it's going to help you in your practice. So on this slide, we have linked the principles of realising the ambition to Curriculum for Excellence. And for those of you that are either already delivering funded early learning and childcare or thinking about delivering it in the future, and perhaps you've been looking at the national standard and the criteria around learning frameworks, I would really recommend the Scotland's curriculum website to you, where we've taken this image from. It presents Curriculum for Excellence and the key principles of Curriculum for Excellence in just a very few but very simple and visually appealing pages of the website. So it's a really great start, along with realising the ambition, if you are starting to think about your learning framework and what you might be required to demonstrate as part of the national standard for early learning and childcare. So you can see here the principles in the boxes around that image. And one of the things that you might notice is obviously the fact that the theme of quality threads through everything in realising the ambition. And it really needs to permeate every aspect of our practice. So being a reflective childminder who thinks about their own practice, questions their own practice, takes opportunities to talk with others where that's possible, is really key to having that high quality service. We've also got a clear message in realising the ambition that play is the most appropriate way for young children to learn. And I know that play and the kind of real life meaningful experiences that children experience in childminding settings are very close to all of your hearts, and we want to encourage this. The holistic nature of early years is also key, and this understanding of a holistic approach informs the decisions that we make about how we support children's learning and the learning framework or curriculum that we offer. Realising the ambition takes account of research and helps you to link that research to your practice. And again, research tells us that when we upskill the workforce, we can make a real difference to the quality of provision that's provided and also to the quality of children's experiences. So we want you to feel empowered and confident in your practice, that by supporting children's play and supporting those meaningful real life experiences as you do, that you're providing the very best support for children in their early years. And we're really inviting you to engage with realising the ambition as a philosophy for early childhood. So the significance of the guidance might seem of the design of the guidance might seem an odd thing for us to reflect on. But as we were developing Realising the Ambition, it was really clear to us that the design was absolutely crucial. You might think it's just a document to pick up and read and then act upon, but actually getting the look and feel of it right was really important to us, particularly given how well received Building the Ambition was before it. So as you engage with the guidance, you'll see lots of imagery. There are illustrations, children's drawings, and you can see the progress of children's drawing throughout the document. There's also a range of photographs and so on that speak to the voice of the child and their experience while they're with us. And the language of Realising the Ambition is very much reflective of the language of the child, what they need from us and those who care about them deeply. And yes, in Realising the Ambition, you will find the word love. So the different colours of the tartan that make up the weft and the warp are used in each section of the guidance, and they guide you through the document, woven together to symbolise the notion of a shawl. The shawl being the Scottish equivalent of the New Zealand mat that's key to the early childhood approach to whareiki. So our tartan shawl is strengthened by the inclusion of a golden thread that runs through every page of Realising the Ambition. And that thread of quality is so important. So the imagery of Realising the Ambition intends to reflect the uniqueness of the Scottish culture and context, and the value that we place on supporting the developing child, keeping them safe and secure. Now, the guidance very deliberately uses this landscape format in order to articulate children's progression. And the tables in the guidance from pages 26 to 31 set out what you need to provide in terms of interactions, experiences and spaces to best support young children as they grow and develop. And we use the terms when I'm a baby, when I'm a toddler, when I'm a young child to illustrate developmental needs over time. But we know, of course, that these aren't rigid lines of progression, that children will develop, they'll all develop at different rates. Children will need to revisit their learning and go back over ground that perhaps they have experienced before. And so, as I say, whilst we've set it out in terms of these lines of progression, it's not something that's rigid for all children or indeed linear. And we need to be very clear that this information is provided for your knowledge, to support your understanding of child development and to inform your practice. It's not intended as a learning framework or as a curriculum, and it certainly was never intended to be turned into any kind of checklist. In fact, if you see a Realising the Ambition checklist, we can tell you that it's not a Realising the Ambition checklist, because the approach here is very much about responding to the individual needs of children, and we absolutely want to move away from any checklist type approach. So section 2 of the document is called Being Me, Starting Strong, and all of the images in the guidance have been drawn from children and families across Scotland, and they all articulate key messages. And we particularly loved this wee one, couried in on their parents' tartan shirt, looking so safe and secure and content lying there. And this section 2, very much sets the tone for the rest of the guidance. It absolutely puts children at the very centre of all that we do. And I'm going to say a wee bit more about the image of the developing child in a few minutes. But section 2 also refers back to that period pre-birth to 3, and it highlights the important role that we all have to play in supporting the mother and the unborn child from their earliest days. And you know, one of the things that we know from EPI research, for instance, is that one of the most important things that early learning and childcare offers is that relationship between the provider and the family. And often, as much as what we do with children is really important, it's also that relationship that we build with that family that can support them through challenging times, which is also of huge significance to them. So the language in section 2 also points to what children need from us as individuals, what they need from their environment to help them get off to a strong start, and how their socio-economic culture has the potential to impact them. And I'm sort of stressing that potential, because it doesn't have to impact on them, but it's something that we need to be aware of in all of our approaches, and taking account of in our practice. And I think, one of the things after this really difficult year that we've had is to reflect on how the culture of Scotland will or will not have changed once all the restrictions are lifted. And that's something to think about in terms of how it affects the children and families that we're working with. Section 2 also talks about the role of the adult in facilitating the very best experiences for young children, for the baby and the toddler, and in a range of interesting spaces. Realising the ambition tells us the crucial role we play in supporting children's development and learning, and in recognising the impact of our practice cannot be underestimated. In order to do this effectively, we need to have some understanding of the pattern of development of young children from pre-growth to growing into a young child. It's important to know how children develop and learn from the beginning, how they are developing at any point in time, and how they might develop and learn in the future. So I said that I would come back to the image of the developing child, and this is absolutely central, along with that golden thread that runs through realising the ambition, the child at the centre and our image of that child. And you can see from this slide and also from the guidance that the definition that we use is the same one that was used in building the ambition. It comes from the European Commission, and it talks about children as being unique, competent, active learners who are curious and capable and intelligent individuals that co-create their own knowledge, but who need and want interaction with other children and also with adults. And so I think it's reassuring that, having reviewed all of the content of the previous guidance, this image of the child still absolutely stands firm for us in Scotland. And one of the things that we don't do in Scotland is we don't use a deficit model of seeing the child as becoming something, whether that's an older child, a learner, a pupil, a young person, an employee, an adult. We recognise and value the child as being a child, a baby or a toddler. And that's why, right throughout Realising the Ambition, we promote the voice of the child to remind us of the importance of just being, of enjoying and being a child at the beginning of our lives, rather than always striving for what's next. So in section 3, section 3 is by far the longest section of the guidance, and by necessity it takes you from that journey from pre-birth through early childhood as the child grows and develops. This section talks about well-being, movement, coordination, confidence, creativity, curiosity, and it picks up on issues such as attachment, the policy of getting it right for every child, schematic behaviour, additional support needs, adversity and trauma, and conscious and unconscious bias and equity. The guidance, though, also stresses the need for those of us who are working with babies and young children to look after ourselves and take time for self-care. And I think that's something that we can all recognise the importance of, particularly over this last year. And the early part of this section draws on work from James McTaggart, who was one of the contributing authors to Realising the Ambition. And James has given us some content here around 5 dimensions of child development, which we would propose as being amongst the most important aspects of child development. And if you'd like to learn more about these, then please use your evaluation form at the end to tell us if you'd like us to go back and revisit things in future sessions, or perhaps to explore some of the areas of the guidance in much more detail. So sections 4 through to 6 talk about the importance of play and pedagogy. And I want to say just a wee bit about each of those things before we move on. So the definition of play here comes from the UNCRC General Comment 17, and many of you will recognise that that's the definition that's used in Scotland's play strategy. And it's also the definition that informs the thinking behind realising the ambition. So realising the ambition acknowledges that the concept of play is complex and that it's all too often misunderstood. And so the guidance really strives to have a clarity of message around play and to highlight the value of play from the baby's earliest days on into early childhood and indeed beyond. And play is an intrinsic part of human development and nature, but it isn't simple. And a challenge for us is to go beyond the word play and to consider how play and learning are associated. And we recognise that people can learn without play, but I think there's a very big question mark over whether you can play without learning. And it's for that reason that we tend to talk about learning through play rather than talking about learning and play as separate entities, particularly in early childhood. So through play, the child can learn to answer their own questions, they learn new skills, and they learn to work collaboratively with others, with children and with adults. Realising the Ambition talks about the learning environment in a slightly different way, probably to previous publications and guidance in Scotland. And we define it as the totality of all of the interactions, the experiences, and the spaces where children are learning through play. And every learning environment, in terms of these interactions and experiences and spaces, tells us a story about how play is valued in that setting, and whether that's a childminding setting, whether it's out in your local community, or whether it's in a centre. So we need to reflect on our interactions, honing our skills of stepping in sensitively, knowing what questions to ask, what statements to make to help children develop and deepen and extend their thinking and their understanding, but also having that skill of knowing when to hold back and to give children the space to explore for themselves. We need flexible experiences and experiences that can adapt. So as we observe children at play, that's informing our practice and telling us what we need to do next. And we need to think about a variety of spaces. And of course, if there is any benefit whatsoever to the COVID pandemic, I think it's the fact that it's got many more of us outside for much longer periods of time. And, you know, it's something we've been trying to promote in Scotland for a very long time, but we're really seeing that there's been a great push on that over the last year, and people are really seeing the benefit of it, both for their own health and well-being, but also in terms of meeting children's needs. And we know that the home learning environment, whether it's a child's actual home or whether it's the home learning environment provided as part of your childminding setting, that has the potential to be really rich in opportunities to engage with for children to engage with concepts, foster skills for learning such as reasoning, creativity, problem solving, and so on. And the choice of experiences on offer should reflect an environment which has open-ended possibilities, in which children feel they are naturally motivated to explore and investigate through play, including taking calculated risks and learning from their mistakes. And in realising the ambition, we see the voice of the child being expressed in terms of their actions, emotions, and words. And realising the ambition also encourages us to be mind-minded, to recognise the independent thoughts and feelings of individual children, and to reflect the experiences from their point of view, so reflecting the kinds of things that they might be thinking about as we're playing with them. And to be child-centred is to realise how all of these aspects interplay, and our role is to decipher what they mean in order that we can best support the children in our care. Now, this slide obviously is about pedagogy here, and I think some people promote a view of pedagogy as being very complicated jargon that's difficult to understand. But while pedagogy is possibly a new concept to some, it actually can be really simply described and is really simply described in the guidance. So realising the ambition explains that pedagogy is what we know about children and how they learn, together with the interactions, the experiences and the spaces that we provide. So you can see there that what you're doing every day with the children that you're working with absolutely fits that model of child-centred play pedagogy. And it's not something that's terribly formal or out with your experience. It's absolutely something that we know that childminders right across Scotland are using every day in your practice. And in realising the ambition, we use a number of really carefully designed sketches to offer kind of practical help in articulating processes. And in this one, you can see all those elements of play pedagogy coming together, the interactions, the experiences and the spaces, along with what we observe and know about children's actions and their emotions and their words, and what they're telling us through those things about how we might best support them. Sections 7 talks about quality, and I'm not going to say a great deal about this because we've already agreed that one of our future sessions will focus on quality. But we know that research has shown that high quality early learning and childcare provision promotes children's development and learning, and in the longer term enhances their educational and life chances. But we also know that poor quality provision can have a detrimental effect on children's development. And that's why quality is the most important of the 4 pillars of the early learning and childcare expansion across Scotland. And it's also, as I say, the reason why we're going to come back and look at quality in a session on its own. Section 8 of the guidance talks about transitions, and it was clearly written before the current pandemic, which swept aside all the norms of systems and routines that we were used to and recognised as part of everyday life. But the OECD quote on page 91 of the guidance is timely, because significant considerations now need to be given to children's attachment, their adjustment, attunement, and executive function. And as childminders, many of you will have been working throughout all of the lockdowns, supporting key worker families. And we know that, you will know that families and young children require us to continue working closely with them and their communities and with other professionals in the coming months to make sure that we continue to get it right for all children at this difficult time. And we recognise that for many families in Scotland, childminders play an absolutely crucial role in both the vertical transitions that children have as they grow and get older, perhaps from when they start at an early learning and childcare centre and then go on to school. Throughout that time, as I say, the childminder is very often the one consistent source of support for young children and their families outside of the family unit itself. But it's not just the vertical transitions that are important. Children experience what we call, in realising the ambition, horizontal transitions on a daily basis. And many of you will have children attending with you that might be on blended placements. And we know that in Scotland, we're actually very good at getting pastoral support for children's transitions right, but we still have some work to do in getting it right in terms of supporting children's learning and progress across transitions. So again, we're looking forward to coming back and revisiting transitions with you later on in the year and looking at this in a bit more detail. Section 9 talks about what we can learn from outside our own practice, and how good is our early learning and childcare, the self-evaluation for self-improvement framework encourages us not only to look inwards at our own practice, but also to look outwards and forwards. And so Section 9 provides an insight into various approaches used to support early childhood learning and care across the world. And it's an interesting read, and there are lots of links in there if you want to go a bit deeper into any of the sections. So to sum up then, there's a great deal more in realising the ambition that we can hope to explore this evening. But we do hope that this evening's session and realising the ambition, the guidance aspires to support you in your work with babies, toddlers and young children right through into their early years of school. And we're now going to move on and consider how childminders across the country have been using the guidance to support their practice during what we know has been one of the most difficult and challenging years I think the world has ever seen. So I'm going to pass over now to Lynn, I think, and I'll switch this presentation off for you, Lynn.
Okay. Thank you, Shan. And what I want to say very briefly, because there's so much more to cover tonight, is just some of the feedback we've had from members. We have already ran 8 Realising Ambition courses, with another 2 to run before the end of this month, and 171 plus members have accessed that training. And this is just a wee taste. This is not 171 pieces of feedback, but it's just a wee taste of some of the feedback from members who wanted to share what they've learned from accessing the training earlier this year or at the end of last year. And the first one is all about schemas. Now you'll find schemas at 3.3 in Realising the Ambition, but it's how this particular childminder really wanted to know more about schematic play and how to recognise and develop that type of learning, and went through the links in the online version of the publication to learn more about that. She also reviewed her equal opportunity policy to include gender equality, and you'll find gender bias at 3.7 in the publication. The next part, she was well aware, as you probably all have been during this last year, the importance of looking after yourself first, so that you can take care of others. And at 3.8 is a whole section about being you, and it focuses on your mental well-being and your physical care of yourself too. Because if you're not right, then how can you care for little ones that really look up to you, giving them the best that you can? There is also the SDMA Health Assured resource, which is what she's gone in to have a further look at. That provides so much right across the board for members to access and can be found on our website. She also realised, and it's interesting that Shan more or less finished off there about the importance of play, because she wanted to learn how to be more flexible and responsive to the children's needs and not be as structured as she has been in the past. So that whole section 4.1 on the importance of play really helped her expand what she could do and how she could be far more responsive. Play pedagogy was the next section, which is covered in 4.2 and 6.1, putting it into practice. And I think Shan has said quite a lot in that just now, but all this childminder finished off, and her feedback was saying this gave her reassurance and confidence in what she was already doing. So it wasn't anything new, but she felt that it confirmed something within her setting. And she also considered her learning environment, something else Shan has just spoken about. And what she is going to do is look at the early childhood curriculum and the learning environment in more detail, but also look to see what SCMA courses she can access to increase her knowledge on that. That also links into the importance of continuous professional learning and critically evaluating her service. So again, section 7, as Shan mentioned there, the last part that this particular childminder fed back about was the challenge questions. And she really found those to be challenging, but so helpful and useful, but decided bite-sized chunks was more than enough to take her through, particularly the period of lockdown when she was still working and everything. But she is going to go and access the other publications on play and making best use of the outdoor space all the year round. Again, there's a wealth of links. On the online version of that, and all you have to do is click on them. You don't have to start typing in the whole web address or anything like that. But the next feedback we received was from a childminder who took the whole attending the training as an opportunity to update her paperwork and check all her policies, which again links to the previous one, speaking about our equality policy, equal opportunities, and including the gender aspect in that, gender equality. Now, most childminders I've ever met in this job or my previous role as the Quality Improvement Officer, gender equality was second to none. They never ever treated children differently in the respect of their sex. But it's about making sure that's included in your paperwork in the sense that parents and grandparents follow that through as well. So have a think about it. The next one was developing a new observation document. Now, we have been asked about observation templates. What this childminder did, though, was produce her own one on the back of the training and included her role in supporting the child's learning. Now, our training course, Child Development, Observation, Assessment and Planning, does give you some examples of observation templates, but for you to develop further and amend for your service to record what you're observing and why you're observing it. And that can vary amongst the different children that you have, as well as just your setting. The fifth piece of feedback we received was about how this childminder was able to help children transition in a better way. She felt she learned so much more about communicating with the parents and the child, and that helped set her whole paperwork pathway on defining transitions, which can be found in section 8 of Realising the Ambition. And the last one was she gave feedback on how she found it so helpful to improve her setting. And again, another one that's updated her equality policy, but looked at some of the ideas. There's a wealth of ideas contained in that document, and it's there for you to use. You don't have to start from scratch or anything, but it's looking at how you can improve what you're doing and the difference it then makes to the children, the difference it makes to your setting. And I just want to finish off by saying these are just a few of the childminder that's given feedback to SCMA over the past 9 months, in fact. But if there are any areas of the document that you want more advice, resources or training on, please let us know, because that's what we're here for you. You're our members. We want to support you in the way that you identify. So please let us know. And I will now pass over to Janine.
Thank you, Lynn. That was great. And it is always, I think, really good for everyone to share some of those experiences amongst colleagues of what is happening, how some people are taking the guidance and using it in their setting. And I think I would probably just like to reiterate a couple of things that I have heard tonight, and that is, you know, Sharon was talking about reflective practice and critically reflective practice. And I think whether you're a childminder, whether you're a childminder development officer, whether you're an education officer, whoever you are, if you're working with children and young people and families, reflecting on your practice should be part and parcel of every day. And actually being here tonight is part of our learning journey and that reflection. So actually, and I'm not sure if anyone came tonight expecting a neat package of this is realising the ambition and this is how I'm going to use it, and you know, I'm sure you haven't, because I think we all realise that we're all on those learning journeys, and actually this is part of one phase. What we are conscious of is that realising ambition, as you know, is so rich in the content. I mean, there is so much in there. Every time you go in and come out and go in and out, you see something new, don't you? You know, you read something and then you go away and you maybe develop some practice and you reflect on it again later and you think, actually, I'm going to change that further. So it's the resource is there as a constant. You know, I mentioned hard copies earlier, but I think it's safe to say that this should never be seen as a resource that goes on the shelf. This should be seen as a live kind of, you know, resource that we dip in and out of, that we use all the time. If it's a hard copy, I would hope it's a well-thumbed hard copy that is, you know, brought out and looked at regularly. But similarly, it is one to keep going back to and to think about in other ways. And some children will encourage us to have to reflect on how we're thinking about the guidance and how we approach that individual child that is unique to them and who they are. So I think on that basis, it's just important to say that tonight is about thinking about realising the ambition, how we're using it in our settings, and how we're thinking about how we're going to use it in our settings. Because for some of us, again, it's maybe still early days. It will also be about reaffirming some of your practice. A lot of this, you know, we know that childminders are so rich in terms of their, you know, their knowledge and their understanding and their skills. I mean, the variety of skills and experiences that childminders bring to the table, and I know you know this, but I have to keep saying it, it's phenomenal. You know, the variety of backgrounds in terms of where people have come from and how they come into childminding is so rich and varied that actually you bring that experience with you, and we have this really skilled set of practitioners who are already probably demonstrating key aspects of the guidance in their practice. So sometimes you do it almost subconsciously, but it is about thinking and understanding, this is what I do and this is why I do it. And I think for us tonight, it was about setting that context again, just setting our stall and saying, okay, we've got this guidance, how are we engaging with it? Lynn has mentioned that we have got SCMA, have got training that many of you will have participated in. But if anyone is interested in doing further training, then as we said, let us know what you want, because we've got a couple of options. We will be running more CPL workshops, Realising Ambition workshops, end of August, beginning of September. We don't have the dates confirmed yet, but that will be coming. So keep an eye out for that. We did actually offer a 50% discount on that last year, and that will continue this year. So if anyone's wondering about that will continue. So we'll continue to offer that discount. We also have a video overview, again, just for anyone. Sometimes people like to go back and watch video as opposed to read something. We've got a video overview that's on YouTube. It's also available on our website. And again, for anyone that actually feels they want to go into some of the key topics or the themes in what I would call a deep dive, you know, that you want to really get in and about something and explore it further, if you could let us know by way of your evaluation, as both Lynn and Shan have said, what topics you would really like to explore further, then we will look to develop that further, because I think Education Scotland, ourselves and Scottish Government are all keen that we continue to support CPL amongst childminders over the coming years. So if you've got any individual kind of topics that you really are quite passionate about exploring further, then please do tell us, and we'll.
I'm looking at the clock and it says 19:29, and I have to say it's about 7:10 this evening. I didn't think we were going to be able to finish on time, but it looks like we've managed to pull it round. So can I just say, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We know that there's probably many nicer places to be on what I hope is a reasonably sunny evening where you are, but we really appreciate you being here, and we do hope that you'll join us again after the summer with the sessions that we're planning. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. Have a nice evening.
Bye.